Here. Good morning to the West Coast, because we're here on the West Coast. It's still morning time, but afternoon for everybody else. Good afternoon. Going to talk about the Chinese manufacturing that is flooding the world with their products and causing the disruptions within places like here in the United States. Janet Yellen has just recently done a trip to China to try and discuss some of the issues that she is now very concerned with. And something that I found interesting, I left two articles down in the description. One of them saying that China is like, hey, we're just doing our jobs here. Screw you if you don't think it's adequate for your needs. We're doing what we need to do. This is China saying that. Now, Janet Yellen on the other side is saying that she has told Biden that she will not accept the reality again, right? Like, the reality that China is going to produce cheaper products that they can then flood the world with. She's not going to accept this reality. And I'm thinking, okay, so what are you going to do? Just be delusional? Because that's exactly what that is saying. That you, talking about Janet Yellen, expects that there's going to be any kind of change to the way that history has always conducted itself when it comes to the manufacturing base of a nation once it has increased their standard of living. This is something that the United States is going to suffer with. And this is something that we have talked about on this channel so many times in the past. That once the United States had increased its standard of living due to the increase of manufacturing that we had done back during the Industrial Revolution, and we produced all these wonderful products and sent them out to the world. And the world was sending us their money. And we increased our standard of living. Once we have increased our standard of living, we start moving into foreign production. We start buying the products of other nations because they can produce it cheaper than what we can do ourselves. And if you give it enough time, what we will end up doing is sending all our manufacturing base out to foreign production, right? And this is something that was described hundreds of years ago. Let me read this from Cantillon's essay. The increase in supply of money from the balance of trade. This is when you produce a bunch of stuff, and then you start increasing your standard of living because you have an abundance of money that is now flowing in. This is what the United States was experiencing back during the 50s, 60s, even earlier than that. Right? This, in turn, puts pressure on domestic producers and increases imports. Right? So as we increase our standard of living, the domestic producers can no longer produce it in an efficient manner, and then they start importing from foreign production. Right? This results in the balance of this result is that balance of trade is reduced and even negative. Right? This is what the United States is now experiencing. Right? Is negative trade. We import more than we export. This is Cantillon's price specie flow mechanism, which demonstrates the reason for the tendency for equilibrium in international monetary flows. Now, what he was describing there, was when the United States severed ourselves from the gold standard, saying, nah, you're not going to cash in your dollars for gold any longer. This was the reason why, is because there was going to be an equilibrium of this. The balance of trade can result in economic power, but this also causes the economy to lapse into luxury and decline. So this is really what happens throughout history. And this is something that is not going to easily be changed. You can go ahead and invest a bunch of money and time and resources and effort into making production come back to the United States, but how are you going to do it in a way that is going to be competitive against foreign production? You can't. And this is where trade wars and tariffs and all kinds of other things begin to start to take place, as the United States is trying to protect itself from the efforts of other nations who are also trying to do exactly the exact same thing, right? Want to produce the products, good products, cheap products, and sell them to whoever is willing to buy them. Everybody's playing this exact same game. Unfortunately, the United States has too much input cost. Our labor cost, our land cost, our factory cost, energy cost, everything costs too much. And China is doing the same thing. They're subsidizing a lot of this, just like the United States is doing. Right? But what are they going to do? They have to do this in order to bring the new money in. The United States doesn't have to do this to bring new money in. We don't have to manufacture to bring the new money in. I mean, it's a better way. I mean, a good, strong economy is built off of production and savings, but we don't necessarily have to produce anything. We issue debt. And I know that's not a good thing, but that's what we do. And that's what we're going to do. and what it's going to continue to do going into the future. And no matter how much Janet Yellen says she's not going to accept this reality again, she's delusional if she thinks that she can do anything about it. Like, you can do stuff about it. I'm not saying that you can't, like, actually put some effort in, and you might be able to, like, slow things down, or maybe even make it appear that things are getting better, you know, but they're not. And eventually the economic forces are going to play out. See, this is really where it comes down to, like, understanding the economic forces to begin with. And I think the analogy of the job site with two guys who are working on a job site, one of them's a ground man, he's working on the ground, the other one goes up onto, like, the third story and, you know, communicating what it is that he needs to the guy who's on the ground. And all of a sudden a hammer comes down and hits the guy on the ground, right? Kills him. And then all of a sudden everybody's trying to figure out what happened, right? And they're trying to say whose fault it was, and, you know, there's all the issues that start to come about it, and, you know, putting blame on the guy who was up on the third story, and other people are blaming the company itself, you know, and wanting to sue the company, and, you know, who knows what it is that's actually gone happen. And yet somebody who was watching from a distance comes up and says, hey, I know what happened. It was gravity. Gravity brought the hammer down and hit the dude, right? And now nobody looks at it that way, except that's really the reality of the situation. And it's the guys it was the guy on the ground who should have been aware of the dangers that he was in, and should have been positioning himself to avoid those kind of dangers. But if you don't know, or you're being told, or you just don't expect it, then other things can start to impact your life. Very much like the fact that a hammer could come down and hit you. Now, yeah, there could have been a lot of reasons. The guy could have dropped it by accident. He could have thrown it down. There could have been all kinds of things. But ultimately, the guy on the ground should have been aware of the should have been aware of the forces that were taking place, very much like positioning yourself for the economic forces. Right? And this is really like how it goes down. Like, gravity exists no matter what, but if you're flying a plane, everything's cool. So long as you have fuel for the plane and it doesn't, you know, the engines work, everything's cool. You never really think about the gravity being that dangerous. But it really is, right? Same thing that's happening here. See, the economic forces that are now playing out, that are making it very difficult for manufacturing to come back to the United States, are not something that you can fight very well, right? You can fight the gravity, you can, you know, the same, like, natural forces that occur out there in nature. You can try and do things that are against that, but it doesn't mean that they're not there, right? Very much like this situation is. A lot of people want to blame it on politics. You know, the politics part of it came after the fact, right? Like, you can't have a political environment that is enforcing trade wars and tariffs and stuff like that if there wasn't a need for it to begin with. Like, if it wasn't for the economic facts that were happening within this shift of manufacturing power, if that wasn't taking place to begin with, then the political force wouldn't have to be there to try and attempt to stop it. Okay. Anyway, moving on here. We got 8 minutes into it. Thank you all for joining in. We got 163 people watching right now. Thank you for talking about this. You are a rare gem. Well, thank you. What is that? Sanity Island? Where we go? Glasses, broken glasses here. Okay. All right, well said, Simon. It's pretty nearly the only reliable source of information on these issues, which is shocking, but I think it shows the pressure on the people doing this is to be dishonest. Yeah, absolutely. So we're grateful for you being willing to speak the truth, Simon. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brody, and thank you for being here. You know, I don't try to come up with things that I think people are going to think that I'm right about. I'm just calling this stuff out the way I see it. Like, I know it's very different from a lot of other people out there, and there is so much blame that you can find a lot of it to put around, right? You know, you can blame a lot of different aspects, or from a lot of different positions and ideas. But the way I see these things is really like, in my opinion, it is from a view that is not one with an expectation. Like, I don't have investments that I'm trying to position for, but with this information. Like, I do it naturally just because I'm taking on the information, but I'm not trying to present it in a way that says, hey, you need to invest in this particular fashion because of these things that are occurring. I don't look at it like that. The way I look at this thing is literally from a personal point of view, which is the way I feel that everybody should be looking at it, because nobody knows what it is that you need in your life. There's nobody on YouTube, there's no video, there's no anything out there that is going to describe exactly what it is that you need for your life. You need to figure that thing out for yourself, right? And that's really what this is all about, is trying to understand it from a very, like, how do I put it, unbiased view. I mean, you're going to take bias to it no matter what, but as much as you can to say that, as much as I would love to blame the politics of this, it's really a naturally occurring thing that politics is going to attempt to deal with, right? And then you can look at it in that fashion that says, hey, this is the reason why they're doing these things, why they're putting on these tariffs and doing the trade wars and doing all this other stuff, is because they're reacting to some of the situations that are happening within the economy itself. A lot of people think that the politics is guiding the economy. That's wrong. That's not what's happening here. There are things that happen within the political atmosphere that will then cause the economic forces to be the way they are. Say, like, severing us from the gold standard and continuing on with the issuance of debt. But again, that's a bigger economic force. That wasn't necessarily the politics saying, hey, let's do this, right? Although you can tell the story that way. What ultimately happened is that everybody in the world wanted the ability to do transactions, and they found that within the dollar. And since they were willing to accept the dollar as good as much as they were gold, then that gave them the ability to do the transactions. Everybody demanded that, and they flooded the world with dollars. Right? Once everybody figured out there was too many dollars, and they had to sever us from the gold standard. This was all economic forces that were happening at the time that the politics were then interacting with. Again, you can point at it and say, no, politics caused it, or you can think politics was interacting with the situations that were happening here at the time, and there was a handful of people who really benefited quite well from that. All right, moving on. Thank you for the $10 super chat from Jake Northwest. Thank you so much. Last trade I ran by you here was buying long bond at 5%. It won. Next trade I'm going to consider is shorting TJ Maxx because the consumer is tapped. What do you think? How about you all in the chat? Okay, so me personally, I think that retail is going to get hit very hard. Like, anything that has retail oriented space behind it, including, like, lumber yards and stuff. Excuse me. Something that I'm finding very interesting within this is I was not expecting it. I really, and I mean, I'm looking for the last indicator to turn, but it doesn't appear to be going that way. And that's with lumber futures right now are dropping, and they're dropping significantly. I mean, we're down at like 550 per thousand. We were up at 600 per thousand and moving up just a few weeks ago. And I thought, okay, here it comes. The home builder sentiment is about ready to turn fully positive. It's gone from negative to positive, but not on all conditions. Right? There's a lot of conditions within the home builder sentiment that has turned positive, but there's still the buyer traffic sentiment is still incredibly negative when it comes to the home builders, right? So, like, sales conditions, building conditions, all the other conditions are slightly positive. Like, they feel good about it. The only thing they don't feel good about, and they feel very negative about, is the buyer's traffic. That part is still very negative when it comes to the home builders, and I feel that if that was to go positive, then the demand for lumber would definitely be moving up in a dramatic fashion. And I still, at this time, don't feel that there is a whole lot of production taking place within the lumber industry, considering how low the futures price is. Right? And even just seeing them dropping right now is an indicator that says, hey, this industry is not having a whole lot of demand for this particular product. So where's the new inventory for homes going to come from? Where's the demand for new construction going to come from if you don't even see it within the futures? Like, the futures price of lumber, this is the indication of distributors, the major builders out there, all the indication of where it is that home building is going to go is very, very much told within the futures market. Now, it's not a set in stone reality when you think, okay, futures prices are dropping, that means there's going to be less home construction, but it's a pretty good indicator considering some of the other things that you're going to find out there. And now to me, that's another one. It was just like, man, this is not necessarily what I was anticipating. But however, if that does change, that home builder sentiment, which is the one part that I am still waiting for, right? A lot of people said, you said this and you said that. No, this is what I've been saying the whole time. Once that home builder sentiment has gone completely positive, then you're going to start seeing a lot more demand for lumber, and there's simply just not enough in the system. I mean, you think about it, even right now, there's Oregon mills, lumber mills shutting down all over the place. Like, it seems every other week I'm reading about another one getting shut down. So, and Oregon's like one of the major producers. Actually, I still think it's the biggest producer of lumber in the entire country is the state of Oregon. I don't know if that's still the case today, but it was just a couple years ago. So. All right, moving on. We got 238 people watching. All right. Notice clothing and other things are being made in Mexico, Vietnam, and Turkey now. Yeah, I've noticed that quite a bit of stuff is starting to be made in like places like India as well. Nails, like gun nails, almost always, exclusively, 100% of the time they were going to come from China. There was a couple of U.S. manufacturers of them as well. But now, like, I'm finding places like India and Vietnam, like other places are starting to produce what I would typically see only almost always exclusively coming from China. Yeah. All right, not 150K, much lower wage was around 10 per hour for trades. New construction, they're building like crazy in Florida, north, south, east, west building. They're building a home. If it's an empty lot, there's a house in a few months. Okay. Nice live chat, but really not interested much. Just going bottom line by buying gold and silver. The market will take care of itself. Thank you. I'm out. Peace. Okay. See ya. Clothing and small appliances have been made for decades from Vietnam and India. Yeah, no, I'm not. Absolutely, it has. But where has the bulk of it come from? It came from China, right? I mean, there is manufacturing of all kinds of products from all over the world. I mean, not every single item in the entire world was made in China. There was other manufacturing taking place all over the globe, including the United States. The United States is a major manufacturer of stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to deny that at all. Like, we produce a lot of stuff here. We're a major agricultural export, right? We export a lot of agricultural products. We build a lot of stuff here. We make a lot of things. We have good, high quality tech products. All kinds of stuff is made here in the United States. Problem being, we don't make enough to distribute to the rest of the world what it is that we buy from the rest of the world. Our trade imbalance, that's the problem, right? We export far less than we import. We import a hell of a lot more products than we could ever possibly produce for ourselves. And that's where the major issue comes in, is that we have a super high standard of living that has caused this situation to take place. Like, when we were the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, and we were producing all that stuff, and everybody was sending us their money, think about that. One income could produce enough for an entire household, right? You could have a wife and kids and car, vacations and college and retirement and all that other stuff off of one income. Why? Why was that the case? It was because we were producing and saving like no other nation was. And when we raised our standard of living, we wanted to maintain that standard of living. And when the prices move up, we started going into foreign production. And it's described right here perfectly. And there's no reason to think that, there's any like political atmosphere that can reverse that. It doesn't work like that. We can reverse it, but we have to lower our standard of living. We have to work incredibly hard to pay off debts, do this for generations. Like, no new stuff, like no luxuries, nothing like that, just bare necessities, right? And if we did this on a regular basis and we had generations of people who were in this condition doing this, everybody together, no debts, right? Well, then we might be able to do something that reverses it, but there's no economic model in the entire history of time that's done that, right? It goes to this big expansion before it crashes, before everybody suffers in misery and poverty, right? War, destroying the nation, economic fallouts, whatever. It's like it doesn't, it, you don't reverse into a better situation. Besides, do you want to work twice as hard for half the amount of stuff that you have? And you want to spend the rest of your life doing that and then burden your children with that idea as well? I mean, that's really what you're asking for, if you're thinking that it can be fixed. That's the problem with it, And it's sad to think, because really that's probably what we should do, Yes, manufacturing moved out of U.S. in the 80s. First wave of feminism had women enter the workforce, increasing labor competition. That's why we require dual income families. Well, okay, I think that was probably a symptom and a result of the efforts that came, or from the economic impacts that had happened. That's the efforts that they tried to deal with, right? It's not, that didn't cause it, right? This is another thing. That didn't cause the situation, right? None of that did. The economic environment allowed that situation to occur. Remember that, okay? That's the problem that we are facing, is that the economic environment allowed that to occur. All right, I'm sure you have the answer, Zimmerman. The point wasn't things weren't made out of their places, but there's clear shift away from Chinese manufacturing. If you can't see that, then you can't be helped. That's right, Benny. And that's the problem that China is actually going to face, because they're experiencing the exact same thing. The reason why manufacturing is leaving China isn't because China sucks, right? The United States doesn't suck, right? But manufacturing left the United States, and it's going to leave China. Why? Because it's cheaper to manufacture other places. Why? Because Chinese standard of living had increased from all the massive amounts of production and manufacturing and exporting that they have done over the last few decades, right? Has put themselves in a position in which then, damn, now they're not competitive. And they're going to be pissed about that. They are going... See, the major problem that China now faces from that is that China doesn't have the ability to do what the United States did. So the United States had everybody like hooked up on the dollar. So when it came time to sever the gold standard and issue out debt, the dollar was already being used as the world reserve currency. So it was like people didn't really have much choice. Like if China wanted to have that same thing, people would have to consciously choose to use the yuan, then try to actively acquire yuan, and then try to get other people to use the yuan for their trades that is outside of China. All right? Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to trust China. Besides, they don't even want to use the yuan. They want to use some kind of debt instrument, because at least a debt instrument would pay you a little bit of interest. Using cash is costly. So now you have to have some debt issuance coming out of China that is significant enough for people to actually have the ability to use it for transactions, and then they would have to trust that China would pay those debts, those yuan-based assets. See, this is why the United States is in the position it is because there's no other nation that's willing to go into debt as deeply as the United States has to issue out the safe and liquid assets of those U.S. treasuries. That right there is giving the United States a position that is so unique that no other nation could really even attempt to duplicate that. And right now, China would be that nation, because as they start losing new money coming in from their manufacturing base that is now leaving their country and going to other places, they're not going to have new money coming in. And without that new money coming in, they're going to start suffering from misery and poverty. So they got to do whatever they can to keep the new money flowing in. Part of this is to make sure that people are buying their products. If they can't, they're going to get pissed, and they're going to start doing something about that. Who knows? War? Some kind of other takeover? Like you think about the Belt and Road Initiative, most of the debts that they had issued out, that they had loaned people, like they loaned nations all over the world money to build up their infrastructures, to build ports, power plants, coal mines, whatever it was. China lent them the money to do that. They did that in US dollars. This is what's nuts about it, right? So now as these nations are having to pay their debts back to China, they're paying them back in US dollars. Right? This is, I mean, if you go and read this right here, let me see if I got it. Dollar funding stresses in China. Right? This is coming out of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. It was written November 1st, 2022. So it's not even that old. I mean, this is a fairly recent document. You read in there, and they straight up acknowledge the Belt and Road Initiative on how that is one of the things that China is going to use in order to bring their new money in, right? Is to keep the flow of dollars coming in to their nation. If they cannot do it through the manufacturing, they're going to get it through debt issuance. This is crazy to think about. Most people don't even acknowledge this. Don't have any idea that this is even taking place. All right? Like you gotta internalize all this information. I mean, there is no news broadcast in the world that's going to explain all this stuff, right? You got to know it for yourself. All right. Here in South Carolina, around Charleston, residential construction is booming. It is the influx of people fleeing the blue cities, but it's driving land cost here exponentially. In 92, my new 1,200 square footage, all brick, 3-bedroom, 2-bath was $54,000. My wages were $9 per hour. Interest rate was 9%. Okay, Benny and Zimmerman going up. Okay, let me cruise down here a little ways. Seraphim is called living off the land. Okay, in China, silver is already $30. I'm the coolest dude here. All right, but that's illegal. How do they part their taxes? Okay. My current mindset is get some property and grow and raise what I need. Growing life organic, that is probably one of the greatest things that you can do. I mean, it's just like anything that you could do to be self-sustaining is like the less you require from anybody out there and the more that you can do for yourself, the less needs that you have out there. This is how you find freedom, right? Freedom is what? Nothing left to lose, like not needing anything. I don't know, like wealth is food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. Like if you can take care of your food needs, like you can grow your own food, you have plenty of food, food, that's a wealth. That's very much wealth. Conveniences, like, I don't know, I have a car, I have a phone, like that's pretty convenient. Like I don't know what else I would really need for my conveniences. I mean, maybe little things around the house could be like, add to my convenience of life. But for the most part, I don't need a whole lot of stuff to even make it convenient. I have all the conveniences I really need, right? Now it's just pleasures of life, just enjoying it. This is wealth, food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. I could tell you one of the most pleasurable times in my life, although I was not in a very good condition, like financially and even mentally, when it came to drinking and stuff like that. But I found a lot of pleasure on just being on that little hobby farm, raising the chickens and, doing the vegetable garden and just playing around just there with the little farm that we had going. I mean, that was a lot of fun and it was very rewarding, and I didn't think about like what was on TV or social medias or even like mainstream media news or any of that stuff. It was like I didn't need any of that stuff in my life. I had all the food, had all the conveniences, and really I had a pretty pleasurable experience doing it. I felt very wealthy. Yeah, and I didn't have any money at all, like none, super broke. Most comments I make on self-sufficiency get tossed. I suggest you find a digital copy of the appropriate technology library, everything you need to know to build civilization. I have been helping friend operate a 10-acre farm since 2016. We are part of a co-op. See? Good stuff right there. Don't forget the convenience store is right around the corner. Yeah. Joking just came in. Yeah, you bet. Well, no, it is. It is right around the corner. And that's another thing about having conveniences is the location that you happen to be in. Like when I lived in town, I hardly had any food at the house. Like we would pretty much buy what we need just for the next couple of days. And so we barely really didn't have that much. I mean, and that was really odd for my wife and I, because we have always lived out in the, never in the city, within city limit. Well, we did when we were younger, but for the most part, we always lived far outside of town. And you were just kind of preppers by default, because you just didn't want to drive all the way to town to get something, you know, something that you didn't have there at the house. So you'd always have a lot, like a lot of food, or a lot of, just whatever stuff in the pantry. But moving to town, it was so convenient, because now the grocery store was literally literally 5 minutes from my house. Like I could jump in my car, be there, and be back. I was, even if you're in the middle of cooking something and you ran out of a particular ingredient, it wasn't that far away. I don't have that convenience anymore. So, conveniences of your life are really, a lot of it has to do with just location of where you happen to be at. There's some places that you don't need a car. You don't need a car to get around. You can take some public transportation or whatever, bicycle or something, and be just as convenient. Moving on. The word freedom comes from government. Liberty is given by God. There you go. I feel iPhones are like a cancer on society. I own one too, but distance myself from it. Stay curious. I really agree. I think the social media is there, like, the Facebooks and all that other stuff. I think those are pretty damaging. Well, I mean, they can be damaging for the personal interactions that you really should be having with people, but people get this false idea of connection when they're on their social media, and getting the likes and posting the pictures and doing all this other stuff. I personally used it to my advantage, right? So, I mean, I started the YouTube channel and I built this thing up, and I actually get paid from it. So, to me, like, using social media to advance myself is really what I did. But I find, like, even like lately, I've been on Facebook a little bit more than what I had normally been. Like, I didn't even open up a Facebook app for years until just recently, when I went down to Vegas and stuff like that. I made a bunch of Facebook friends and stuff like that. So I had been there, and I found myself kind of getting a little bit more addicted to mindless scrolling. And when I find myself doing it, like, I usually catch myself within a minute or two. It's just like, whoop, that's it. Put that thing away. But I can see how damaging that can really be. At the same time, it's also pretty beneficial, right? So it's like a double-edged sword on it. Is it really damaging society when you can have the ability to, advance yourself and earn a profit off of it? I mean, to me, that's a good thing, right? But the connection loss that we are really getting, that personal connection, or the false idea of connection that we get from it, is very damaging, so. All right, 322 people watching, 88 likes. Let's go hit that like button, guys, and get it up to a couple hundred people here. I'm going to be out here for probably another, say, 10 minutes, maybe. All right. Damn, scrolling is real. Doom scrolling. Yeah, it is. It really is. And that's, it's the moment that I catch myself with it, like Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts or anything like that. I mean, I agree. Like, I'm just a big, I blame myself for doing it, just the same as everybody else has done it. I don't like the idea of it, but I've caught myself doing it when I recognize that it's happened now. Because occasionally, you find like a YouTube short that you want to get a little bit of information, like there's something on there that might be relevant to what you want to know about. But for the most part, they're not, right? They're just kind of short little entertainment things that give you a little shot of dopamine that you really enjoy. And as you're sitting there getting your little shots of dopamine, you don't even realize that you've been doing it for 2 hours. And then you put your phone down and you can't even do something as simple as the dishes without feeling incredible boredom coming over you. Something that would normally give you a little bit of pleasure, like going out and gardening, feels like an overwhelming task because you've been sitting around getting these dopamine hits from these shorts, and now you can't find any kind of satisfaction in anything else in your life because you were getting these false dopamine hits for the last few hours. That's the problem with it is. And now, like me personally, I figured out how that works, right? And because I've recognized like where it is that my attention ends up going to when I'm doing stuff like that, I now know to focus on what it is that is more appropriate, right? So ultimately, if I find myself doing those things, I quit, and then I go and I do the things that I know are going to be more of like the chasing of excellence. And then I find that those things excite me and that I am actually not bored doing those things. And then when I find that I'm doing things that are not the chasing of excellence, like coming up with the next video or doing research or doing an actual live stream, when I'm doing things that are not that, that's boring. Like watching movies is boring. What, doing things that is not, in my opinion, the chasing of excellence is boring. I get my dopamine hits from doing the things that I find are advancing me. And that's, anyway, I'm babbling. Moving on. Okay. Do we want to talk some more about manufacturing? All right. I may fail, but I'm starting to put a structure in place, guardrails in a sense. Yeah, there you go. If BYD enters the US, Tesla is done. If you can't read or write cursive writing, then you will not know the Constitution nor the Bill of Rights. Well, that's not true. I mean, why would that be the case? I mean, it's all written in text, I got a copy of the Constitution sitting on my desk. It's not written in cursive. Like, I know how to write cursive, but I don't think there's anything that in the Bill of Rights or whatever that can't be just typed out. Like, I'm not sure exactly what it is that you're kind of coming from on that one. But memorizing the Bill of Rights is really important. Like I cannot find pretty much anybody out there who has, memorized or at least know. You don't have to know them verbatim, but understand and know the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The only one you really have to know verbatim is the fourth. The fourth Amendment to the Constitution, the rights of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. Show me the warrant. And as All Nighter has informed me, show me the signed warrant, because anybody can go get a warrant, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was signed by a judge. And those things aren't hard to learn. Once you understand and know the Constitution, then you start looking at the political environment in a whole different light, because those people are not there protecting your constitutional, the constitutional aspects of things. You are the one who is responsible for protecting the constitutional rights. There's nobody else out there, only you. And that's the problem that most people end up facing is like they expect that law enforcement or the government or anything else is going to behave within your rights. That's not true. Only you can protect them, right? And the only time that you can protect them is at the time that they're being infringed. So you got to know what they are to say, hey, no, you can't go any further than this. I'm not accepting of this, right? This is not the way this is going down. No, I'm not going to answer your questions. No, you're not a judge, juror, or an executioner, and this isn't due process. So no, this isn't going to go down like any of this. You hold the highest authority in this land, and most people don't even realize it. Like, there's no higher authority than myself. That's it. Right? And now understanding my constitutional rights now has me understanding how it is that I have to behave within society, within the world. And I know that when I go to cross the street, that if that sign doesn't say, hey, you can walk at this time, then I'm not going to do it. Because I'm not going to get stopped and have somebody question me and ask me who I am, what I've done, where I'm going, any of that stuff. I don't answer those questions, right? Unless I've committing, or about to commit a crime, I don't talk to anybody, right? That's not me. I'm not going to answer any questions. Silence is golden. All right, moving on. Another $4.99 from Victor. Hey, Victor, thank you so much, man. What do you think about turning Mexico into a manufacturing hub for the U.S.? Can they replace a portion of the Chinese goods? I think they will do it, and I think it's going to happen just by a naturally occurring thing. Manufacturers aren't going to, like, I mean, how do I say this? Manufacturers are going to go to the cheapest, most efficient place that they can go to, right? And now here's the thing. If transportation was just super expensive, right, to transfer stuff from China to the United States, let's just assume that's really expensive. but it was really super cheap coming from Mexico because they're right there, right? So the efficiency of traveling from Mexico to the United States as opposed from China to the United States, and I'm just like, this is like completely hypothetical, right? But let's just say that's the case, right? That the transportation is super expensive coming from China, but it's really cheap coming from Mexico. Even though it might be cheaper to manufacture in China, if you can manufacture it in Mexico and it'd be cheaper to get to the United States, then that's where the manufacturers are going to go because that's the most efficient, profitable place to be. And now, whether that happens to be Vietnam or Mexico or India or anywhere else, it doesn't really matter. The manufacturers don't care. They just want to go to wherever it is that's going to be the cheapest place that they could possibly manufacture it in order to distribute it to the place that's going to pay the most. And that's, and however they figure that part out, or however that just naturally occurs, whether it ends up in Mexico, I don't think that's going to be like an actual choice that they do. Hi.
How are you?
Doing very well. Right. So anyway, that's like the she kind of thought she was going to come up and talk to me. Anyway, so that's really ultimately how the transfer of manufacturing is going to take place. Like, even when it came to the United States, I mean, it didn't necessarily mean that it had to go to China. It's that China was the most logical place at the time, and it was the most, efficient place. It was the one that everybody was going to, and it certainly ended up being the number one country of manufacturing, considering all the rest of the nations that were out there that were also trying to do it. Like, India is going to be a major manufacturer here soon. So Mexico, Vietnam, all these other places where it's more efficient. And the only reason why it's not efficient necessarily here in China anymore is because of literally the 20 years of manufacturing that has brought the new money in, has raised their standard of living. It's just no longer efficient to be there anymore. So yeah, I mean, I think it can go to Mexico, but is it going to be the manufacturing hub by choice, or it just happens to go there because that's the most efficient place to get the products made and then distributed to the United States, who happens to be the major buyer? So I don't know if that answers the question. Thank you, Victor. I appreciate the $4.99, man. All right. Let's see here. I've been tempted to say hi when I see you, but I have too much respect. Huh. I mean, it's cool to say hi. I mean, all right. Spit your game, my boy. Right on. Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia will rise as manufacturing centers. His wife could be watching. All right. Does that mean Mexicans will flee the states? I don't. I mean, I can't imagine that being like anything that's going to happen within the next. Like, you got to think, like, manufacturing shifts don't happen in a matter of months or years. I mean, it takes a long time. Even the efforts that have come from the United States in an attempt to bring manufacturing back to the United States probably won't be fully felt fully for another few more years, right? Like, I mean, I think there's still, like, how do I put it? Progress to be made towards the advancements of manufacturing here in the United States. I think that can still happen from the investments that have occurred, but I don't think it's going to be enough, is what I guess I'm trying to put at. Is like, for the next few years, we might see all this attempt to bring manufacturing and all these tariffs and blocking out and subsidies and just like all this stuff that's happening, but there's no reversing course. Like, you're not going to all of a sudden find an environment where the tides are now flowing manufacturers back to the United States, not without incredible effort. Right? And like I said, that effort would be government subsidies and tariffs and trade wars and all the other things that go along with it. Like the naturally flowing occurrence of manufacturers wanting to naturally be here because this is the most efficient place to build and distribute from. How do you create that environment? Right? You got to have a lower standard of living. You got to have an advanced, people who are advancing, like building up their nation with more power plants and distributions and stuff like that. We're already there. Like, we're too far out, too expensive, too outdated to be competitive like that. And I mean, it's a great sounding thing. Like, hey, let's bring manufacturing back to the United States and produce for ourselves. Sounds wonderful. Let's do it, man. I mean, I'm down. I just don't see how that's going to work. All right. Can China's dictatorship force their manufacturing to accept less profits to stay competitive? How? How do you like that? This is something that I find very interesting, is that they're already trying to be competitive. How do you make them be more competitive? Like, okay, take for yourself. How do they dictate to make sure that they can be competitive on the world scale? The worker has to lower their standard of living. That's it. Right? That's the only way to do it. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. They're going to be like, well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to go someplace else, right, to manufacture this stuff. If you guys want to be paid that much, see ya. Right? Because that's really what it comes down to. You're going to be like, well, these corporations shouldn't earn so much money. And they'd be like, okay, see ya. I mean, you can't tell people not to earn money. Like, okay, take for example, I think Peter Schiff had a great explanation of this. Let me see how much time I got. Okay, I got to go, but Peter Schiff had a great one when somebody said, like, if you earn more than a certain amount of millions of dollars every year, then the rest that you make after that should be taxed like 100% or something of that nature. And he was just like, whoa, wait a minute here. I can only earn so much money, and then after that, I think he said he should be charged like 70% tax, like pay a 70% tax on everything that you earn beyond like, $20 million. I forget what number it was. And I just remember Peter Schiff laughing about that. And he was telling me, he goes, wait a minute. He says, now, if I'm only earning 30 cents on the dollar for every dollar that I am earning after a particular amount, I'm not going to attempt to do that. In fact, what I will do is I will shut my business down, I will lay everybody off, and I'll say, see you all next spring when I can earn my money again. Because I'm not going to go and put out effort to try and only earn 30 cents on the dollar. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I totally agree with that. Like, why in the world would you put out effort to not earn it? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I know that I'm not exactly the richest person in the world, right? Considering that I don't really have a whole lot of my life, including a decent savings account yet. But I would like to be rich someday, and I don't want to be punished for being there, right? And so the idea that you can tax the rich is not going to necessarily work for the benefit of the people, right? Because what they will do is they're going to go find some other place to be where they can continue to be rich, because that's what everybody would want to do. And if you tell them, oh, I'm sorry, you can only earn so much money here, and then you won't be able to operate here anymore, they'd be like, okay, well, I'll just shut down, right? And go operate someplace else where I can earn my money, because there's no point in doing it for nothing. All right, moving on here. I got to go, guys. Uneducated Economist, you have been a great audience. We got 341 people viewing with 132 likes. We got $14.99 in super chats. I really appreciate those super chats. I think this is a very good topic. I think this is one that a lot of times, like, people don't take into consideration the economic forces that are happening and really just want to blame this 100% on politics, which I think is, plenty of blame to go around, but isn't necessarily the cause and effects that are happening here. The effects are definitely impactful to the United States when it comes to, decent paying jobs, but it also affects the prices that we pay from these cheap foreign imports that we get, which we all enjoy because we have a high standard of living and we enjoy those luxuries. All right. Uneducated Economist, you let me know. All right. Hit that like button, please. Right on, all-nighter. Thank you. Thanks, Simon and everyone. All right. Good point, Scamp. The U.S. is the most productive country in the world per capita. Yeah, but it's also the most inefficient, I believe. Okay. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.